All right.
Buenos dias, buenos tardes, good evening, everybody. It's your main man, Shannon. Welcome to the Car Chronicle, the road trip. As promised, my goal in the road trip is to do three things: to empower, to enrich, and to engage you and introduce you to people that I love and care about and that I find that are great. And today, on today's episode of the road trip, is my good friend. He's a philanthropist, he's an entrepreneur, he's a leader of leaders, he's a husband, he's a father, he's a military veteran. Man, a bit of everything. He's a fighter. He's a lover, like that I know, but he's a lover because he loves people. My good friend, Matt Wilson. Matt, welcome to the road trip.
Shannon. Wow. That was love that intro. I feel like we're gonna have a ton of fun today. I love your energy. Dude, you're gonna be big, man. You already are, but you're gonna be big.
And I think I don't know if he means big this way or what, but Matt and I go way back. Matt knew me at the start of the Helping Hands Giving Hope journey, and I'm more grateful to say that I know Matt. Matt, tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. So I hail from Northern California. What not everyone knows about me, though, is I was homeschooled from the time I was in fourth grade all the way through high school. So I try to demonstrate enough social skills to mask the fact that I was isolated for part of my childhood. So spent most of my time in NorCal, moved to Texas for a couple of years, got lost in West Texas, lived out in the middle of nowhere, learned how to shoot guns, and then came back to California. I have 3 black belts that I picked up during that time in different forms of martial arts, mostly, karate and Kempo styles. And then I joined the Navy, of all things, coming out of the Bay Area. That was almost like sacrilegious to go join the military. Nobody did that. Became an intelligence officer for 7 years. So spent my time over in the Middle East and then tracking submarines in the Western Pacific. Went to Harvard Business School. After that, moved back to Hawaii, where I had lived before business school. And from there, I was getting into a role as an investor, investing in a lot of real estate, some companies. And one of those companies was the one that we ended up working at together. So I invested in Payoff, which was helping people get out of debt. Joined the team in 2014 and was there for 7 years in different capacities before running a venture capital firm for 3 years. And now what I do is I love to coach. I coach CEOs on how to build their businesses, and I bring a strategic finance lens to what I do. Personally, married for 20 years as of the end of July. So huge milestone on that front. And I have 2 boys who are ages 12 and 10.
So here's what y'all didn't know. This is how, when you got friends, first off, I didn't know Matt was homeschooled.
Right?
As a lot of you guys know, Amber and I homeschool our kids. Not Shannon Jr. now because he's in high school, but Abe was still homeschooled until high school. And I never knew he was from the Bay Area until a Bible study earlier this week. He mentioned that, and it's funny that Matt talked about how we connected. And Matt and I met. And it was funny because it's interesting how people have impacts on your life. So when I was employee number 16 at this company we worked for, right, and they bring Matt in, and Matt was an intelligence officer in the Navy, and I think weren't you going to be a Navy SEAL at one time?
That's right. Yep.
And
Yeah.
so they bring Matt in, and when you hear all of this stuff, and then you get to know him, he's not what you think. And I think that's the win, right? It's funny how God connected us. And that was my first question to him is how God connected us. Is He connected us in a time where we didn't know we were going to be connected, and we definitely didn't know that we would stay connected.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as
Well,
you talk about the whole VC space, I think a lot of the people that listen to this, they're people, they always ask, how did you know? How do you know what businesses to get involved with? And they don't understand the idea of an investor and then how that plays into investing in yourself in the later years. Can
yeah.
you talk a little bit about that?
Well, one thing as far as like you don't know what companies to get involved in, um, you really don't on many levels. Like the ability to predict the future is fairly limited. We can come up with all kinds of models and guesses, but at the end of the day, what I've learned is you work with people and good things happen. And so, case point, right? Like you and I work together And there were dozens of other amazing people and relationships that we picked up from that time that are still paying dividends. And one of the things that when I'm working with CEOs, I help them realize oftentimes they get very focused on hitting business outcomes. I need to hit sales. I need to raise capital, all these different, and then they'll end up using people to hit a target because they're so anxious and focused on hitting that target that it's just like they will push, prod, cajole, intimidate, whatever's required, inspire, like whatever tactic they feel at their disposal to try to get this outcome. And I've come to the realization, it's like, hey, and we've all lived through this. When you're running a company or you're in a leadership of a company, you often think about people that are joining and leaving the company as if the company is the thing that stays.
Mm.
Okay.
That's good.
But the thing that I realized, companies come and go, people are permanent.
So, guys, here's what you might not know. So, the company that Matt and I worked for, I got laid off for that company. And many of you that know my story, or if you've heard me speak at different events, I always talk about January 28th, 2015, when my life changed and I got laid off from that company. And I had a mentor. Matt doesn't know this. So January 28th, I get laid off, and I'm driving down the slow '05 freeway at 4 p.m. and I'm crying as I get 4 exits from. And I was like, Lord, how could this happen? And the Lord said, I told you to leave that company months ago, but you didn't trust me enough to do it.
Hmm.
And out of all the people that were there, and it was probably by that time, maybe it was only like 40 people there, I think 40 or 50, maybe by that time in 2015. And it was interesting because Matt gave me a hug and he was like, I love you and I believe in what you're going to do. And I had no idea what the hell I was going to do. I think I was going to do anything.
Hmm.
I had this bright idea. Maybe I'll go be an itinerant minister. Boy, how right and then how wrong was that? But when he said that, I was like, okay. I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
And my mentor at the time, Mike Anderson, rest in peace. Mike passed away in 2016, right before this. But Mike said this, and I never forgot it. He said, "Oh, that company laid you off, but they're going to be one of your biggest supporters."
Hmm.
And I laughed, and I was like, "No way." And that was the first corporate event we did at Helping Hands Giving Hope, was with Payoff.
Yep.
And Matt kind of helped spearhead that and connect the dots and connect me with other people to do with the things that God's called me to do. And I'll post a picture of that in the chat, or so people can see it. But it was interesting, as Matt says that you don't know what the future holds. Like, you're not going to be able to tell the future.
Yeah.
I've talked about this on today's Car Chronicle. Those of you that follow me on Instagram, that the rapper Mace said something, and I was like, well, he said the worst thing to be is I used to be. And I was like, oh man, the worst thing to be is I used to be. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And so when Matt talks about some of this stuff, and as he continues to talk, I want you to keep that in mind. Like, the worst thing to be is the guy that used to be what God told him to be. So Matt, you said something though. You said that you're a coach now. I always say, anytime people that ask me about you, they said, Matt's a guy that leads businesses, CEOs, and high-level performers.
Yeah.
Now you're a leader of leaders. Can you talk a bit about how your military experience helped shape the things that you do today?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, military. So when I joined the military, so I went, like you mentioned, I intended to be a Navy SEAL. 9/11 happens when I'm in the pipeline to be a Navy SEAL officer. And so I didn't have my application in yet. I was going through officer candidate school. Here's the crazy story. I sat down one day and wrote out, if I had 10 different lives to live, what I would do in each one, because I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And the Navy, especially being a Navy SEAL, was the only one that I had to do by a certain age, or it was going to be off the table, right? If I wanted to go run a martial arts school or or be a U.S. senator, back then I thought politics sounded fun, or do one of those other things, I was like, okay, like that will require like that, benefit from experience, but this is the thing I have to do now. So I went down to a local strip mall and it said US Navy recruiting. I go in there and like, I want to be a Navy SEAL. Well, turns out, because I just finished college, I could also become an officer. I didn't even know that. This was how little I knew about the whole thing. So they sent me down the street to the officer recruiting. And it's like, this is what I want to do. I'm like, well, it's really hard to get in through officer candidate school to go in even a SEAL, but that's what I wanted to do. So I start heading down that path, getting, my scores in. Another funny side story on that. I drive down to San Diego because that's where the swim pool was. I was living outside Sacramento. So it's, I don't know, 9-hour drive, something like that. And I couldn't get a hold of the person that was supposed to do the test. I just kept getting an answering machine back when there were answering machines of this Master Chief. But on it, it had the recording of like, hey, show up at this time at this pool if you want to do the physical test to become a Navy SEAL, right? So I drive down there. This is, mind you, post 9/11, like in the month or so after 9/11, and I'm a civilian. I get down to San Diego thinking there's one Navy base and there's 4. So I'm not exactly sure which one it's at. I figure out which one it's at because I'm super early and now time is ticking. I get up to the gate and they're like, oh, you're a civilian. Nobody's getting on base that doesn't have military ID. I'm like, well, how am I supposed to get through this test? And one of them, I was so persistent in telling my story. One of the former Army guys that was working guard security escorted me back to the pool and handed me off to the Master Chief in order for me to actually even like get through and start the test. There's a longer backstory there. I meet this girl who's now my wife. My application is in. She says, I love you. I think you're the one. But if you go Navy SEALs, I'm out. Like, and in my head, I'm thinking I'll let the Navy SEALs decide whether or not they want me. I was gonna have to wait a whole nother year because it came down to me and one other person for the last slot of the year. The other guy gets it. Navy Intel says, we'll take you right away. And that's the story of how I became an intelligence officer. So the cool thing about it was this: in the military, immediately, first assignment, I've got 25 people reporting to me, all of whom are more experienced at what they're doing. And one had decades of experience on me. And like most of them are my age or older. And you're thrust into a leadership position like that. You very quickly learn that you're not supposed to be the person that knows it all. You have to come in and learn. So for me, it was a huge part of it, coming in with the attitude of learning and respecting the wisdom and the intelligence of my team, which then gave me actually a better opportunity to lead them, because the person I was replacing had been a little dictator and telling them what to do instead of drawing the best out of them. So people often have this misconception that in the military, it's easier to lead because you give orders. And that's not really true. The reason being is nobody likes being given a direct order and barked around and told what to do. Maybe you do that at boot camp because that's like the game. But in the real world, like once you're out of there, people want to be like, asked. They don't want to be told. It's the same thing. It's humans everywhere, right? And so that's a big piece of it too, is just recognizing that the same things that work for leadership in the civilian world work in the military world and vice versa. And I'd say another piece, a big lesson of leadership in the military is understanding followership, because everyone in the military has to follow someone even as they're leading others. And if you're a better follower, then you can be a better leader. Even the most senior person in the entire military reports up into the civilian sector, right? So somebody, they're always answering to somebody on the way out.
That's the ultimate. I remember one thing from working with you early on is that you would always defer to those that knew more about the situation than you knew.
Yeah.
And I was something I always picked up on, like, oh, this guy, he's always deferring to someone that knows more than he, and then you'd weigh in. Hey, guys, I think we should respectfully try this.
Yeah.
And that was a big thing that stood out to me early on. And I think for those of you that are listening, that the idea of the venture capital startup space is the ultimate idea of romanticism, right? Because you think you're going to build this organization, and every organization is going to be the next Facebook, and you're 200,000 shares is going to be worth $400 million one day. And we're going to just have this, everybody's going to be driving a Porsche and I'm going to be driving a pickup truck with, cowboy horns in the back and a shotgun in the window. And,
Yep.
it's the ultimate idea of this, this romantic space. But then there's learning throughout the way. There's ups, there's downs, there's trials. But one thing that I picked up on what you said, that, who God's destined you to be, there's no shaking that.
Mm.
Two people that I care about the most, that's, that I admire in my life are people that mistakenly went into the Navy. One being you, and then one, and then one being my dad in October of 1959, out of Hot Springs, Arkansas, because his mother was injured in an automobile accident, and he was 17 and couldn't work anywhere. So he was like, just as you did, he jumped on a bus, came from Arkansas to California, went to San Diego, and joined the Navy.
Wow.
And so, when I think about how God has destined you to do some of the things that you do now, it's interesting to hear you talk about followership. Because I think we talk about this even on our Bible studies on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that, about the ultimate leader is the ultimate follower.
So I was even listening a little bit to John Maxwell speak this morning, and he is like one of these like leader of leader types. He's written 90 books now.
Yeah.
He's in his late 70s. I actually like him better now than when he was younger, because now it's just like grandfatherly wisdom that he's just dropping down, right? And I guess one of the things is recognizing that when you're a good follower, you often recognize there's what you're being asked to do, but there's also a bigger picture that you're not aware of. And you have to be okay to a certain extent with understanding that you're a piece of something much bigger. Sometimes you need clarification to be able to go act. But if you're not a good follower, what I've seen is there would be admirals that would question the color of a slide. And then all the mid-grade officers in the middle would go running around, like coming up with new slide colors and telling everyone what to do and barking orders down. Meanwhile, no one went back to clarify if the admiral actually wanted something changed. And so being a follower, a big piece of it is the willingness as a leader is often getting clarification from those ahead of you before you act on things and confuse everything or make up work that's unnecessary for the people that are following you. And so another way of saying it is you wanted to be able to like block stuff from rolling downhill to your people if it wasn't intended to, right? So rather than just turning around and being a useless person in the middle management, just pushing stuff down and pushing stuff up, is the ability to think and clarify and say, sir, is this what you're looking for, right? And so that piece of it then means that when you're giving direction down, you're doing that from a place of understanding and be able to convey the importance of what you're doing. I think another piece of this, Shannon, is recognizing that as much as we may aspire to be a leader, you cannot be a real leader unless you do two things. One, lead yourself first, which requires a great degree of humility and difficulty, because even leading yourself to do something consistently is very difficult. And I'd say like the highest form of leadership, if you were also to add another lens to it, would be willingness to submit and to surrender to what God wants to do through you so that your gifts can be amplified to the greatest extent. And that if you're not willing to follow, then you're going to be kind of leading, but maybe leading on your own path and missing the bigger picture of what he's looking to accomplish, because you're willing to acknowledge that everybody is following somebody.
Well, and I think even Jesus did that, right? He says, not my will, but your will be done.
Yeah.
When he said,
while he cried tears, while he sweated blood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you could make this cup pass from me.
Yeah.
It's interesting because when I think about some of the things that you say. So for those of you that watching, the launch of Car Chronicles, the road trip, it came from a conversation that I had with Matt 2 months ago. And it's interesting because Matt, it wasn't a text. He called me, and it was a Friday. So it had to be Friday, July 5th, because the following week we were in Vegas for a national basketball tournament. So he goes, "Yeah, I want to talk to you." So he had some questions on some things that he was working for a client. And then he was like, "But that's not what I called for. Why aren't you doing more?" And I was like, "I think I'm doing a lot. I sit on this board. We just sold fireworks for the last 5 days." He's like, "You're not doing what God's called you to do." And it was really, and he says, "But why not?" And, I was talking earlier to Matt that, the rapper Mace, $MA$E, for those of you from the 90s, he said the toughest thing to be is I used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I always say that the toughest question to ask yourself is why not?
Mm-hmm.
Because when he said that, it really wrecked me. I didn't tell him, but I left that conversation thinking, why not? Why not? What am I afraid of?
Yeah.
What could happen? What could happen? I always say this: you're not going to die. I always tell my kids when you have boys, you say stupid stuff like "you're not going to die."
Yeah.
But when he said that to me, why not? It really caused me to think, because I think the toughest thing to do is to follow God's perfect plan for your life, because that plan is without a great deal of foresight upfront to you.
Right. Often it requires listening daily to get direction. And we would rather it be mapped out a little further. So we got, oh, okay, that makes sense. Now I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's no, take that step.
And it's interesting because when we did the event at Payoff, that was 2016, and that fulfilled Mike's direction of, hey, this company will be a large supporter of yours. And I was like, yeah, no, they won't. How could they do that? They let me go. It was all about me at that point, right? Mm-hmm. They let me go. They, didn't recognize what I did. They didn't see all the stuff that I sacrificed. And then 2 weeks after this event at Payoff, we get a call to do our first event for food giveaway. It was a shocker because I had then had to sit down and listen to the Lord and say, all right, Lord, what do you really want me to do? Because sometimes, we talk to the Lord, Matt, and you can talk about this, and it's a monologue.
Right.
It's, Lord bless my wife, her sister, my story, and no more. But rarely do we sit and listen.
Yeah.
Talk to me about your faith walk.
Yeah.
But it's a big difference between the you now and the you in 2014 when we first met. So how has God moved in your life in those years?
Yeah. So, and even like a big change in the last year for me as well. I'd say, became a Christian at a young age. But then when I entered my professional life, I didn't hide it, but I was just kind of operating under this assumption of like, I will, preach the gospel. And there's a saying, I think it's St. Francis or somebody who says like, preach the gospel. And if you have to use words. Yeah. And so I was like, well, people should know I'll just avoid using words and I'll just live good. I'll do the right thing. I'll speak the truth. I'll be a good leader. I will show up. I will be diligent. I will work hard, like all of those things. And like, obviously, like there's something different about this person or the high quality individual. But there was this weird thing. There was a few weird things for me. One of which was sometimes when you're gifted in the natural, you will overlook the supernatural and you will do things in your own strength, which is often why like really smart people have a hard time trusting God, but other people who are like, I couldn't get through a single day without trusting him, they just find it much easier. And then those who can create complicated mental maps are like, they don't get to the end of it and then realize that there he is because they're still navigating through this complex mental contraption and explanation of why maybe there is no God. And so I did a lot of things in my own strength, or I'd pray, but I wouldn't necessarily wait for direction. I would just, read the Bible a little bit, get some good word there, off we go. And about a year ago, I was going through a training program, and as a part of that, they were looking through like, what does your morning routine look like? And what are the things that you're spending time on as you're prioritizing in the morning? And my morning routine was pretty dialed. It was solid. It was locked on. I'm disciplined. I'm up early. I'm cranking through things. I'm learning. I'm working out, right? And there's this one bucket, which is it's like the spend time with God bucket. And I realized what I was doing was I would shrink that down to almost have no time for it. And it was mostly just me like making some requests or like a nod of acknowledgement. But what I wasn't doing was creating space to listen. And so I'm walking around the block in Dana Point, California as part of this training. And I was partnered up with this gentleman. He just turns to me and asks me this question. He's like, well, why do you think that is? And Shannon, sometimes it's the most innocent little questions that just trigger something. Kind of like the question you said I asked you, which is like, why not? What's stopping you? And it came to me and it was this. I was like, I think I'm afraid of what he's going to say.
Mm.
I was the kid who was just far enough away that when mom called for dinner, I had plausible deniability that I didn't quite hear what she was saying. Right? Oh, you said dinner? Oh, I'm sorry. I couldn't quite hear you. Right? So I was doing that game with God because I probably knew that he was going to ask me to make some changes. And I liked the way things were. I had a good setup going. And so I changed my morning and I flipped it. And I said, God time first. If anything else has to get squeezed, so be it. That's going to be the thing I do first in the morning. And so I would do this thing where I'd sit down and I would write and I'd just like write down everything, take that to God, create this space and almost have like a dialogue where I'd be like, all right, I like ask God a question and then wait till he gave me an answer. And I would just sit there and wait. And that was new for me. And it's like,
Wait, and you just said something. You said you waited till he gave you an answer.
yeah,
Oh boy.
yeah. And then things would come up and I knew it would be God because I wouldn't ask myself to do that. That's not my idea. I don't want to do that. That's but it also wasn't like a bad idea. It was a good idea. But it wasn't something that I thought of on my own. It came to me. And I'd be like, "Oh, God, you're speaking to me right now." And then I would write things out and then I'd ask more questions and wait and get more answers. And end up leaving the venture capital firm, homeschooling our boys. We moved into a house that we custom built in Tennessee. Fast forward 6 months later, we're told to move to California. We moved to California, get here in time to step into a friend's life who was going through the worst marital challenge and worst day of their life. Literally, the day I arrived was the day he needed me here. God's timing on all of this was just insane because I learned to listen. And these are the kinds of things that smarts can't get you there because this is stuff happening that you're not even aware of, the bigger picture. And that's where followership comes in. And I think the biggest thing we're supposed to do is one, be a good follower so that we can actually be a leader. Because if you're not following the right voice, I shouldn't follow you. Because you don't actually ultimately know where you're going. So when you think about it, like there's leadership with like maybe lowercase L, which is like, can you lead us around the block? Sure. Anyone can do that. And then there's like capital L, which is big life decision leadership stuff, right? And who are you following and whose example are you tracking? And then those things, like if they're not a good follower, then you're following the human and not the divine. And when you're following a human, inevitably they're going to make mistakes. Right? So they need to be a follower first in order to really submit and surrender in order to be the leader that's going to take people in the right way. the right
So
direction. And so Shannon, when I talk to you, the reason why I'm like you've got so much more is because of you're such a quality human, full of love, full of giving, full of the spirit. You have followed up with me for years, sending video text. You're like one person in my life that does that. You pop in my phone, there's a video of you like praying for me, saying hi, dropping a word. Like your heart, I don't even know how it fits inside you. It's so big. And that's where I know like the world needs more of that that's coming out of you. They need to know that that exists.
no, real quick. Let me tell people why I do the video text because you're not the first person to mention that. People always ask me that, and I said it's very important because a text can't convey intention.
Mm-hmm.
And so my life is built on every interaction I have. It has to be better when I leave than it was when I got there.
Mm-hmm.
And what if that's the last time I get to see you? I learned this when my mom died. When she died a couple of years after leaving Payoff. What if this is the last opportunity I have? And what I got from what you just said is not just, I mean, the guy that you ran into when you got back, when he told his story, I was floored. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not, obedience, guys. It's not just for your benefit.
Yeah.
It's a chain.
Yeah.
But Matt said something, and I made a note where I had to grab my pad to make a note when you said it because he said he would write stuff down and listen. Oftentimes, what I have found over the last 2 months is that sometimes we don't listen to God because we're afraid of what He might say. Like
Yeah.
we make a. I can share. I'll even share this. Like I have my book and like here's my prayer list. I have a list here and you can't see
Mm-hmm.
it because of the thing.
Yep.
Well, you might be able to see it, but you know what I mean. I have a list. You can't see it because of the. I think the background is blurred, so it won't allow you to see it. But
Exactly.
trust what I'm saying. I write a list of people to pray for every day, and it's funny because the Lord asked me one day recently. He goes, "Well, how come you don't pray for yourself? You pray for others. Others are on your
Mm-hmm.
list. You're never on your list."
Yeah.
And it came to a realization. Maybe I was afraid that of what he was going to say on one side, and on the other side is maybe I didn't think I was worthy enough
Mm-hmm.
to get what I was asking for.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I got from you just now. The obedience, it yields beneficial results.
Yeah.
I mean, God, just as we're, what are the scripture when it says, which one of my children will ask bread and I'll give them a stone, or I'll ask fish, I'll give them a serpent.
Yeah.
Like that's not who God is. And I think we have missed the fact that we are so focused and conformed to what the world says that we can't even remember that God is the God of everything. And the Bible calls him the Lord of the harvest, calls him the Lord of the breakthrough. It calls him, the Lord of war. Matter of fact, it says that. It says, "Blessed be the Lord my God that teaches my hands to war and my fingers to fight."
Mm-hmm.
That's how I kind of live my life. All the time, it's like on some type of conflict because our ministry is built in, our ministry and outreach is built in the streets and dealing with homeless and the marginalized. But a buddy of mine, Tito the Hood Santa, and you guys will see him soon. We're at a backpack giveaway for him 2 weeks ago. And so he was telling us a story, and he says, I prayed, and he was like, and then my mother says to me, "Is that it?" And he goes, I was like, "What do you mean?" He said he thought he was really doing it, and the Lord and his mom said to him, "You serve the God of the universe, the
Mm-hmm.
creator of everything, and this is all you're asking him for."
Yeah.
And when you think about that, you think about now the people you're able to impact and the people that not only you're able to impact them, but who are they able to impact going forward? That's
Right.
a game changer right there. And
Yeah.
it's all based on your obedience. I mean, think
And
about that. Think about what would have happened for the sake of argument. The Lord said, "Hey, I need you to go ahead and get up out of here, get out of Tennessee and move." And you said, "Nah, Lord, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to hold off. I'm going to hunker down here in Tennessee." The guy that was going through this just unimaginable marital event,
yeah.
what would his life be like today? And
Yeah.
when you start looking at it like that, it is like, whew.
Yeah. I mean, this is someone who has told me on multiple occasions that I saved his life. And I don't take credit for that. I feel like it's my obedience. God would have sent somebody else, but he chose to use me, which is a privilege for me, right? The fact that I would be used in such a way to have an influence on somebody else, to draw them closer to God in their darkest day,
Mhm.
when they're having the darkest possible thoughts towards themselves and other parties, but instead, like, prepared me and sent me for such a time as that, such a
Oh,
moment.
wait a minute. You just said something. You said not only did he send you, he prepared you first, and then he sent you.
Yeah, I had been in a season of preparation that equipped me to be able to enter into someone's life and be able to hold space and really press in and express love with that someone felt seen and heard in a way that goes beyond anything I could have ever done before because of the work that
Mhm.
God had been doing in me.
And guys,
Um,
with that being said, real quick, it's that this is the importance of preparation,
yeah,
spiritual preparation. Because that what happens in the spirit manifests itself in the physical.
yeah,
I was talking to Shannon Jr. about this recently. About oftentimes it's tough to act on instinct. But he and I were talking a couple of days ago. I said, well, you have to trust the training and the work that you've put in.
mm,
So, I mean, this is on the basketball court, but I asked him something recently. I said, hey, if a guy comes up to you um, and he's going to roundhouse kick you, I was like, what are you looking at? And he's like, I'm kind of looking at his feet. What's his feet position look like? How's he shifting his weight? Is his weight shifted on his back foot? What's that look like? How's his hips turning? Is it open here where I may be able to stop him from kicking me? And I
mhm,
was like, okay, well, what if he's going to come and do like a push kick in the front? He was like, oh, same thing. I'm trying to see like, where's his feet lined up? What's his weight doing on his hips? Is his torso lean this way or this way? And I was like, well, how do you know that? It's like, well, I'm a black belt in Taekwondo. It's like basic stuff.
mhm,
And I was like, oh, it's basic stuff. It's basic stuff to you because you've put in the preparation to understand that.
yeah,
And when you were saying that, I mean, I think this is where a lot of your martial arts training comes in at, because you've been able to take that in the spirit and then manifest it in the physical. It's the preparation that you've been given that where you're faced with these situations in the spirit where people come in and go, hey, will you pray for me? And you're like, all right, let's not only pray with you, but let's talk you through this to get you out of this situation.
yeah,
And sometimes look, and I'll say this very candidly to those of you that are watching. Sometimes it's you listening to God because God's the one that's talking to you when you're in that situation. I've talked about this, publicly on a couple of occasions. And in 2017, when I had the idea of killing myself, and I was on the 405 freeway, exiting
mhm,
Studebaker, making a left turn in the far right or far left turning lane. And I was like, I'm just going to kill myself. And then, my family will get insurance money. And then the Lord audibly said to me, hey, don't be stupid. You can't kill yourself. What are you going to do? Your wife won't even get insurance money if you kill yourself. You're an insurance agent. You understand that. You're a licensed insurance agent in the state of California. You know that. And I was like,
wow,
huh.
yeah,
And the Lord said, how about you go get help and go sit and talk to someone?
mm,
And I
yeah,
was like, okay. And I did. The next morning, I went and, looked through like an employee assistance and then found a therapist and then, talked to somebody.
yeah,
But it was me being willing and able to listen to God and to know that's the voice of God.
yeah.
Because sometimes the voices that you hear may not be the voice that you thought you would hear. Matt, let me ask you a question. So when you look at the you now, right, spiritually,
Mhm.
and say the you 2 years ago, a year ago, what would you say is the defining thing that has changed?
Yeah.
What's the defining difference that not only you can see, but your wife can see, your kids can see?
Yeah. So I was what I called like I was a believer, but I was very quiet.
Mm,
And even in my professional life, I had this mentality around living a great life and taking care of my family, and then that's good. And also, keeping the planet in good enough shape till when I die, and then the kids and everyone else can handle it and figure out what to do with it. But like, it's not on me after that point. And and then God kind of got a hold of me and said, like, I need you to be living a much more public life. Now, if you knew anything about me, I never needed the attention.
Right.
I was happy to pass the credit. Like, if you needed me to step up and help out, I'm there. Do I need to hog the mic and be the center of attention and have everyone looking at me or whatever? Nah, like, I'm good by myself. Give me a book, give me a quiet corner. I'm happy, right? Don't need this. Don't seek this. I hadn't made posts on social media probably in 4 or 5 years, something like that. And that was back then, it was mostly to help my wife. She had a business. So I was like, all right, I'll
Right.
post a little bit here and there. Good husband acts, right? And then I was given this message, which is, if you're going to step out and take on this calling, there is no more private life. I was like, oh, you ask someone, would you rather be rich or famous? It's like, oh, I'll take the money, right? $1 billion, but I can walk into Trader Joe's and nobody knows who I am. Perfect, right? Anonymity and resources, right? And it shattered this view I had of myself, which was, I was ashamed to be, in a way, who I was, even though I was accepting of everyone else. And what that meant was like, so I'm a white, male, Protestant, Christian businessman in America, right? Like, you're not supposed to like celebrate that you're male. You're not supposed to celebrate that you're white. You're not supposed to celebrate that you make money, right? Like those are things where it's like, just, you're privileged, just chill or whatever, right? And you're supposed to be like, but I'd meet people, oh, they're Hindu or they're from India, these other religions or whatever, and they're telling me about their holidays. And I never thought less of them. I thought it was fascinating,
Right.
right? I was like, oh, cool. Like, what do you do, right? Or Buddhist or whatever. So I was like very open and accepting and loving of everybody except myself. Because I felt like, oh, my thing though is like, oh, well, yeah, whatever, yeah, I'm a Christian, but no big deal, right? Because I was trying to be very inoffensive, but by doing it, I almost became like ashamed of and not willing to share because I felt like it wasn't right in some weird way. But when you talk about like no more private life, it's like, oh, on the other side, you have people that are living disgraceful lives and proud of it and proclaiming it and just like getting fame and notoriety and like just like complete train wrecks, right? And here I am, and I actually have something to give and to share and a few things that I've figured out that helped me become successful. And I'm just keeping it all to myself and being quiet about it, teaching some people close to me. And so one of the things that changed is, I've been going on social media and posting stuff, doing live videos, like short videos, pictures, quotes, etc., every day since January. And I hadn't done so. It was almost like complete darkness on social media. It turns into like, whoa, like Matt turned into a broadcast station. And a piece of that wasn't just like, oh, he's just like sharing silly little stories or whatever. No, it was like hard hitting subjects, talking about God, talking about business, talking about marriage. One time I was like talking about sex and marriage and that kind of like subjects that I hadn't talked about sex with my wife, let alone like publicly. Like we've never talked about it, right? It's like taboo subject, and it's like, and I'm like, I'm like, who am I? And what it did is it kind of like, it opened me up and got me comfortable, even though it was like very vulnerable to feel like I'm just exposing who I am to the world. But it also helped me understand the gospel for the very first time, which is that we're supposed to be a light.
Yeah.
And how could I be a light if I'm hiding? How can I give? How can I share? How can I be used in a meaningful way? And so I've had people come out of the woodwork that I'd forgotten followed me on Facebook or somewhere or whatever, be like, oh, like, I really like your messages and stuff. And I was like, because at first I'm pretending that nobody's seeing it because in the beginning, nobody did. Now it's like people, it's like, oh, wow, like this is what I thought was going to be like a complete professional train wreck catastrophe. No one's going to talk to me again. I'm going to ruin all employment opportunities, et cetera, opened up a whole new world. And so my kids, to your point, like my kids see me talking about God now. We pray as a family together. They see, and the thing is, my wife, who's very spiritual, very in tune with God, she was always the spiritual leader of the house. And now they see that dad's there and carrying a lot of that load, and it's not all on mom anymore. And the reason why that's so powerful is that my boys are 12 and 10, and they look to me for so many things. So mom could like talk about it all she wanted. Dad starts doing it, and it's like, oh,
That's what they see.
oh. So my oldest was up this morning before school, had his Bible out, doing his devos on the couch while I'm sitting over on the chair because it's cool because dad does it. And
It's more is caught than is taught.
yeah, and that was like a missed opportunity had I not stepped up and changed and realized that I have more influence and impact than I thought, and I can build more than I anticipated if I'm willing to do that and willing to be used in that way. And so I feel like the journey I've been on for the past year is the willingness to surrender the control that I was trying to cling to and to pour myself out and to expose and grow and change and become an entirely different version of me that's more alive, more on fire, and step up and lead things. Because one of the other things, because I didn't need to be the center of attention, I also didn't need to be the leader, so I would just let other people lead. That's cool. Like you lead.
Yeah.
Like I've led before, so it's your turn. And then God's like, no, 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 no. Let's say you're running in a pack. You don't step to the side and draw back so that the pack can like someone else can lead. It's like, I need you to lead people. You're not done. I need you to get to the front of the pack. You're going to help pace. You will help other leaders run faster because you're setting the pace from the front, not by getting out of their way and moving to the side. So increase the capacity under you as you rise as a leader. So Shannon, as you rise as a leader, you're not in the way of those that are following you, because as you continue to rise, you create space and a vacuum that they can rise up in. If you step to the side and no longer lead, they won't have someone they can model and that's building capacity for them to be able to grow into. And so it's not about you having to step aside so they can lead. It's actually you leading and continually evolving and up-leveling your capabilities, which gives them a model and inspiration to continually grow. And the leaders that inspire me the most are not static. They're growing. They're developing. It gives me like, I may be looking to chase them down, but they're not slowing down. So it keeps me going because they're going. And it's like, oh, if there's a static leader, I catch them, I pass them. They're not my leader anymore. I like the leaders where it's like, they're ahead of me and I see them continue to go. I can follow that leader for a long time because I see them evolving. And I think that's, as a dad, that's what we do for our kids in the business world. Same thing, right? It's not like, oh, let me, you can lead this, that's fine. It's like, hey, like level up your role, level up your capacity. Another way of saying this is like, you're always working yourself out of a job by building the people underneath you and creating space, and you rise. I've never, it's never been a bad thing when I backfilled myself with people who could do what I was doing, because when you can do that, you just zoom to the top because they're lifting you up. You're accelerating, because once you can get other people to do the job that you did, it's great. If you try to cling to it and block other people away, like hands off my job, right? Then you're actually going to lose it because you're not able to work well with others and increase capacity. And I feel like people like you, Shannon, to have leadership just oozing out of you in a heart of gold, if you can bring others up and become more like that, then your influence multiplies.
And the guy, Matt has said something. He said, your influence multiplies. See, oftentimes that's what we look for. We look for influence in every facet of life. I mean, I think it's, as Matt, I was talking to Shannon Jr. on the drive home. The benefit about what I get to do is that, I drive Shannon Jr. to school every day. So I have that uninterrupted time with him every morning. And so I say this to him every time I drop him off. I said, Dad loves you. I'm proud of you. I'm glad I'm your dad. I'm glad you're my son. Now go be great. Every day. No matter, even if if I pick people up on the way to school, I'm still saying that to them every day. But I learned something today is that the ideas that I have for what we do, Helping Hands, Giving Hope, he made a joke a couple of weeks ago. And I don't know if it was a joke, because we always have him doing something. He was like, geez, I'm tired. I've been doing this for like 8 years. And I was like, well, this is what we do. Like, what are you talking about? Like, this is what we do. And so as he talks about it, we were driving home today talking about a family we were able to bless recently. And I thought about something. I was like, the ideas that I have, and I told him, I was like, once you and Ava take this over, you guys will probably do stuff completely different. And even I see it now. I don't do a lot of the day-to-day stuff for this. I'll go buy the stuff. I go talk to people and raise money. That's what I do. I go talk to people about this vision, about what I have, what we should do. But the tactical stuff of how to do this stuff, that's him and Amber. Like him and my wife, they go and they go, this is how we're setting up today. This is what we're doing. Hey, this is what we need. Hey, next time don't buy as many of these. Hey, maybe we should get sleeping bags. Hey, maybe these people need coats. Get 100 blankets. Can you get me 200 beanies delivered by this date? They have an understanding because I've been able to selflessly lead. But listen, I've been able to go to people that do what I do to say, hey, what do you think about this? And then people have been able to come to me and go, hey, I see what you're doing, and I think you should do more. And I think you can do more. You're playing small. You said that to me. You said I was playing small. And then the next week, Tito, the Hood Santa, we're at a backpack giveaway. We had given away, I think, 350 backpacks. And then he gave away like almost 3,000. And he said to me, why don't you just go buy another storage unit and put it in your backyard until you can get another one because you're thinking small.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa, I'm thinking small. So, Matt, I want to be mindful of your time, but I want you to tell us this. Yeah. What advice do you have to two people? So it's a two-pronged question. Yeah. To the guys, that's the guy that people are always coming to. Can you help me with this? Can you do this? Can you do that? What advice do you have for that guy?
I'd say, based off how you put that question, I would say, look to build capacity in the people that are coming to you as opposed to having to be the guy. So like you want to get them the ability to come, let's say they're coming to you like, hey, what about this? What about that? Or whatever. And they need like, don't give them fish, teach them how. Right. And so one way to do that could be, the 1-3-1. They come with a problem, bring 3 proposed recommendations and what they intend to do. So that's 1-3-1. And then what you can do is basically they're learning how to lead themselves, and then that can perpetuate and multiply. And then what you're helping them do is actually get clarity as opposed to starting from scratch and giving them the answer. Often questions tell us a lot more than answers do. And so equipping someone with a great question, they can use that question the rest of their life. The answer might only be useful once.
Oh, that was a good one, boy. Man, that Matt wasn't something else. Here's the next one. What advice and insight do you have for the new leader, the new person that stepped into filling God's plan and vision for themselves? Because people always ask me this. They go, where do I get started? And like I give them a dumb answer because, I mean, I'm okay smart, but I went to you went to Harvard. I went to a state school, Arizona State University. That's where I went. Forkham Devils. But I say just do something. Just get started. What advice do you have for those people that are just starting out on their I'm following the Lord journey?
On the following the Lord journey?
I'm following the Lord. I'm living what He's telling me to live. The Lord's told me to move. I'm moving. Yeah. What advice do you have for those folks?
Yeah. I would say follow the model. Okay, I'll put it this way. Oftentimes we're taught to worship when we're asked to follow. And Jesus actually never asked anyone to worship him. He said, follow me. And so the key thing is we need to find examples, because when we have examples, we have models. It's like a picture book, and we have a picture book example of what that looks like. It gives us something to live up to, an ideal. And so I would say a big piece of it is look at what he did. Don't just look at how he died. Look at how he lived and model what he lived. So if you come from this place where it's like, what did he do? He woke up early in the morning. He'd go spend time with his father to get instructions on what he was supposed to do. Everything he said was something that he had heard. He rattled a lot of cages, but did it with compassion. He healed people. He went around teaching. So the things that he did was an outpouring of love and compassion, and he'd see people. And it didn't, like, all the people that were like the sinners and the downcast and all them, he just loved on them. The only people he got pissed off were the people who made all these extra rules that tripped people up. He didn't like that, right? And so I'd say, like, don't make extra rules for yourself or others. Look at how God's heart and love is supposed to be flowing through everything you do. And look at Jesus as really the best example of, like, how did he live and how did he do that and how did he figure it out? There is no better example than that. So I would say study that and then create space to hear what he wants to do by doing the things he did. Don't just take the words or anyone else's words that are not God's as gospel. You can learn from it. It can be helpful, but like and I say the other thing is God wants to have a direct relationship with people. That's the other thing that jumps out of the Bible. Sometimes we take the Bible and use that as the indirect way to get to God. Well, it's written down, so that must be my God path. But if you look in the Bible, what God was doing all the time was going directly to people. Said, hey, you, wake up. I want to talk to you. I got something for you. And I believe that God still talks to people, and he wants to have that direct relationship. And he doesn't want it just to be like a woo thing, but like a felt thing and a known thing. And then you go from being a believer to a knower. So you're not just like believing words on a page, but you know he exists because you've experienced what he's done for you and in your life.
What we had a guy at a Bible study a couple of weeks ago. That's what he said. He says, "I don't believe what God's done. I know."
Yeah.
So Matt,
in the old school way, I mean, I think that kind of meant the same thing. But now, like, someone could be a believer just because they, like, I don't know, nod assent to a creed, right? But it's like, if you really believed that, you would probably live differently, right? If you really believe that all those things, you'd be like, oh, there's a much bigger picture here than, like, did I catch the game? Right? It's like, oh, like, there's some big stuff happening right around me right now.
and you know, it's now asking that question: is, am I going to be a part of those things that are happening, or am I not? You know, it's started basketball season for us, and so the girls start on club next week, and then Shannon starts in high school, and so they're at practice last night, and I'm sitting outside, and these kids come. Practice starts at 7. Whether it's like 6:30, and I look, and it's 7:08, and some kids are getting dropped off coming in, and my 11-year-old daughter Ava, she taps me, she goes, "Watch this, watch this." She goes, "Oh, this won't be good. Roll the windows down so we can hear." So the kids run into the gym, and the coach goes, "Hey, who are you?" And I couldn't hear what the kid said. He goes, "You're here to play basketball?" And the kids go, "Yeah, oh yeah. Did you know what time practice started?" He was like, "Yeah, yeah. Are you sure this is what you want to do?" The kid's like, "Yeah, yeah." He's like, "All right, guys, line up." And 20 minutes later, here comes the kids out. And one kid came up with a chair. And I was like, where the hell did that kid get a chair from? He came out of the chair with a chair, set the chair down, and he sat there until practice was over outside. He's like, "That's not for me." I was like, the lack of obedience led to your sacrifice.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a sacrifice you don't want to recover from. So you better listen and get on program early. Guys, that's what Matt has told you. Matt has told you about the discipline in the program. He told you about, hey, I do this, then I do that, and then I do this. He's told you exactly where it is. And Matt will wrap up with this so you can get on your way.
Yeah.
What's next for Matt Wilson, and where can the people find you?
Yeah. So probably two easiest ways to find me: Instagram, Matt Wilson 2.0, or on LinkedIn, Matt Wilson 808. If you type it in, or just Matt Wilson and type in Harvard or something like that, you'll probably find me in there. Those are two great ways. What's next for me? Right now, I'm coaching CEOs, helping change their lives, help them grow businesses. But like, what's next for me is making myself available for God to speak through me in a much bigger way. And so there's a movement that I'm called to lead, which goes far beyond just helping some people excel in the business world. But I feel like there's going to be a massive movement of God that's going to come through the business world and affect families and millions of lives. And I want to be a part of what God's doing. So that's what I'm about, because I feel like when I'm doing that, even though it's scary and it's a faith walk, it's also electrifying. And I'm kind of done living, the safe life. I'm living the life where it's out on the limb, which in some ways is probably the safest place to be, because if we're outside of God's will, it gets dangerous fast too. We just think it's safe because we're trying to control it. So that's what I got, Shannon. And I'm
Well,
excited to be doing this life with you.
well, then I will be posting Matt's info. Guys, look, I want to first thank Matt Wilson for taking time out of his busy day to spend time with us here on the road trip. Matt gave me some great ideas off camera, so you'll see some changes coming to the road trip soon. I want to thank you guys for joining us. Thank you for listening to us. Let you know that I love you, Matt loves you, and we're praying for you. So, on behalf of Shannon Stewart, Helping Hands Giving Hope, the road trip, I love you, God loves you. Keep living in victory. We'll see you soon.